Welcome to the Mangrove Community, strengthening the community one branch at a time. For more information about the community or how to volunteer, please visit mangrovecommunity.org.
Yes, ma'am. All right, y'all. How y'all doing? Welcome back to another episode of Mangrove Community Presents Reasonable Doubt. I'm excited about our guests we have here today. Um, before we get into it, the introductions, I'm excited, but it's also sad. I just got some news that one of our judges in the Supreme Court passed away. Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually passed away, known as a trailblazing lawyer, was in the Supreme Court, fought for gender equality. They died at the age of 87. So may they rest in power. Uh, I'm pretty excited here today. We have Natalia Cornelio here. How you doing?
Well, I'm sad like you. Maybe I'm sadder than you. I think hello everybody. I'm Natalia Cornelio, but I want to spend a minute just honoring Justice Ginsburg. As a woman, attorney, she is such a big deal, and this is a huge loss. I mean, the political landscape of the court is a thing, but you know,
Mhm.
for any young woman who's a lawyer, she was brilliant. She was a constitutional lawyer. She fought for equality, and she made it. And she made it while having a family, and despite a bunch of odds against her. And she really made some things possible for some of us. So I'm so heartbroken. I would be crying if I wasn't fighting tears. And I just wanted to honor her and send my condolences to her family and to all of us who have just lost a true fighter. She deserves and has earned the most peaceful rest that she can get. And I am heartbroken.
Yeah, condolences out to her family as well. Um, yeah, so just give a small second, moment of silence. All right, so we're back with another episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Who's tuning in? I know you could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're here with us today. Um, I feel like what we're here talking about and discussing is very, very important. We're talking about voting, and as Mangrove, the initiative we've been pushing, along with myself, is to not only have people get registered to vote, go to the polls and vote, but we want to inform voters because we've been realizing that there has been people in office that are not representing the constituents in the way that they would like to be represented. And I think we've gotten away from, and we need to start using this title more, public servant, because you are a public servant. As you're looking to serve the people. But I think a lot of people let that power and authority in that position go to their head. And we're just looking for more grounded people. So we're glad to have you on today. Thank you for joining us. And just we would like to know a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background, where you grew up, schooling, career wise.
Thank you for framing this conversation like that. I think it's relevant to your question about me. It's almost my answer, right? Who I am is I'm a mujer, Mexican American attorney. I've been a lawyer for 14 years. I'm from Chicago,
Okay.
and my family is from Mexico. They grew up in the United States. They raised me in the United States, and we always cared about our community. We protested the conditions of migrant farm workers when I was a kid, and didn't get to eat certain fruits depending on what we were striking. We tried, my parents in particular worked hard to get local Latinos elected to represent the Mexican American communities in Chicago, on a local level. And they always made sure that I got the best education. And so I love school. I'm a nerd. I like reading. I like learning. Sometimes a lot of chaos depending on how you grow up, and my family and my community in Chicago is no exception. And so I found a lot of comfort in school and reading. And as I learned and educated myself, I realized that I wanted to make a difference by providing the skills that I had gotten from being educated and sharing and being a bridge between these systems and these spaces where people make decisions and laws in particular, right? They create laws or the laws affect us, but we didn't have any lawyers in my family or in my community. And I thought, well, that should be me. So that's really what drove me to become a lawyer. And then we could talk a little bit about my work, which I think is also driven by that, but
I just want to stop you right there and make that point that family is very important and community. And what you did, it seems like, is you took a look around and you identified issues, and it looks like you were a part of a family that addressed issues head on. But as you know, if you don't have the proper resources, you only can do so much. You only can fight for so long. So you decided to step in and fill that void of not having any representation within the justice system, and bring that aspect to your community and your family, which is beautiful. And shout out to Chicago. I actually just got off the Google video call with all of my family. They were blowing me up. I said, I gotta hop on before the podcast and say hi. Yeah. So I have a lot of family from Chicago. So shout out to Chi-Town.
hi to your family as well, and to mine, my sister,
Yeah.
her daughter, my other sister, my dad, my aunts and uncles, cousins.
Cool. Well, yeah, so family, and then that catapulted you into your career, which I heard you say you've been a lawyer for 14 years now, correct?
That's right. I started young. I'm like a Doogie Howser, like a Dora Hauser. No, I'm just kidding. I just,
I got you.
I was just trying to act like I'm younger than I am, but it's not true. Yeah, I actually, my first job was kind of a sellout job, and I knew that when I took it, but I had never made money, and I was like, I'm gonna learn a lot in this job. And I learned that I hated it instantly. It was people that make money. I'm not from there, which I think is maybe why I didn't like it. But it's also very hierarchical. I wanted to serve people directly.
What do you mean by sellout when you say a sellout job?
It was just like a big, I don't think I've talked about this during the campaign. It was like a big private law firm. Like I went to a really good law school, and the big law firms that make a lot of money recruit really heavy in those spaces. And so this is why we don't have a lot of representation in public service, right? Because
they're snatching them up
them up. Yes. I mean, I remember I told my dad I wanted to be a public defender because I did a clinic in law school, and I was like, oh, like poor people, Black and brown people, they need quality representation. I'm going to be a great lawyer. I'm going to be a public defender. Someone faced with a crime needs the best lawyer they can get. That's going to be me. And he was like, what? A what? and he was he was like starting to be like, no, we want to develop Latino businesses, right? And I called him a sellout. And then I found myself being like, ooh, what's this job that's going to pay me more than I've ever made? But I didn't last. I left very quickly. I left after about a year. I did a lot of pro bono work. I did learn, but I learned that it wasn't for me. And I clerked for a court of appeals to just kind of shift focus. And I did criminal and immigration appeals. And I knew that I wanted to be a public defender. And it was a federal appellate court. This is like a weird legal stuff. But what I learned in my job at a court was that immigration status is criminalized. So I was drawn to being a public defender because I was like, we need equality. We need people to have quality representation when they're facing crimes. But I also knew that there are things that are considered crimes that don't necessarily resonate with regular people. Like somebody using drugs, they probably cause a lot of chaos in the community and in their own lives. But criminal, there's a sort of a disconnect there. And there's things that are criminalized, like loitering, trespassing, in a gas station, right? Like leave, no, I don't want to. And to me, immigration status was like a very explicitly racial example of that. And I'm bilingual. I wanted to spend more time in Mexico. So I was like, I'm gonna live near the border. And I got recruited to be a federal public defender here in Houston. And I was like, I wanna be a lawyer for my people who are charged with the crime of being here.
Right.
On top of other,
switch sides.
Yes, on top of other crimes. And so, yeah, that's it. I think I was drawn to being a public defender. I did it. And what you learn there is what we all know, what we know from the news, from being educated, from reading, that the system is unequal.
Right.
But you see it, and you see it like almost like a in your face data point. Like I had almost 800 clients as a public defender over the span of 6 years. And I could count on two hands how many of my clients were white. And I'm Spanish speaking. So probably at least 400 of my clients of the 800 couldn't speak English. And so there's a racial component, and then they all had me as a lawyer because they couldn't afford an attorney. So, and then you kind of you just see the way that they get treated, and the way that the judge kind of glazes over, like, oh yeah, I know this person. And you're like, but I've actually spent time with this person.
Right.
Like,
you see him as a human being. And that's what I want to ask you is, being in the position that you're in, making the decision to be a lawyer, and on either side of it, and it looks like you saw both sides, it's people's lives that you are handling. And I know on either side, you're presenting the case, and the evidence or whatever it is speaks for itself. But at the end of the day, it's someone's life. When you were on that one side of it, how did you feel? Well, it brought you to the other side, so I guess that answers itself. But on this side, when you know that the system is unjust in certain ways, unfair in certain ways, and it's not looking at these people like humans, how do you go home and decompress at night and detach from that? Because I know you have to find a way to do that, or it'll mess with you.
You're absolutely right. I want to say one thing. I want to clear my name. I've never been a prosecutor.
Okay.
I've only been a defense lawyer, which I know some people maybe will think that that's a disadvantage. I don't, because advising someone on the defense side actually involves really studying the other side, including talking to people impacted by the alleged or actual crime. I just want to clear my name, because a lot of people have been prosecutors who are judges, and I think it's actually special and important to have some people on the bench who haven't done that.
Sure.
But what I did for a year, it wasn't that long, and I was 23, so cut me some slack. But I worked in a space where it didn't matter. It just didn't make a difference in people that I knew's lives. And that's in its own way like a problem, right? It's its own way like contributing to the problem, because you don't see it, you don't know it, you don't touch it, you don't care. And so I will say that being a defender and representing people who are touched by these problems and seeing how the law affects them, seeing their circumstances, right? Like I had a client charged with having a gun. Everyone in Texas has a gun. And he had like a prior felony. So it was a serious federal crime to just have a gun. But he was struggling. Like he worked and he supported his daughter. He was a single father. He supported his mom. He slept on the floor of his living room so his daughter could sleep on the couch, so his mom could sleep on his bed. Like it's when you see that, you think about what the thing that the person has done or supposedly done is differently than if you don't have that context. And, I had a similar situation. I had a client who was deported as a result of having a gun. Also, it's a big federal crime. And it's important, but it was a huge consequences for a 19-year-old kid who had no priors, who had a gun, but he didn't have status. So he got deported. And I knew that was going to happen, and he knew that was going to happen, but we actually were intercepted by ICE on our way out of the court.
Oh, wow.
And it was seeing that impacts you and shows you the consequences of this system differently than if you just kind of hear about it, or if you don't hear about it, you just kind of know. And so I want to just start my answer to your question by saying I value having had the perspective of having served people and knowing exactly what they go, not exactly because I'm not them, but knowing what they go through to navigate this system that hits people hard. It's a harsh system, or it can be. And, you have to find ways to make peace and protect yourself. And the integrity of it all is in accepting where you can only do what you can do. And other people's decisions are other people's decisions. On a personal level, I actually found Aztec dance. I'm an Aztec dancer. And it's a sort of spiritual, ancestral based cultural practice that's rooted in like Mexican culture before the Spanish came.
Right.
And doing that and studying and participating and being present in that helped me focus and, you know, grow and go through those tears that happened often when I started. I was very young when I started practicing. So that's
That's
how
how
I
you
think
decompress.
yeah.
That's cool, and I can see that as being a great way to decompress, especially you're tapping into the roots of your ancestors. So I can see how empowering that can be. And you said a lot when you said that, because what I'll add to what you said, and I'm adding this, so this is me, disclaimer, is the hypocrisy, you know, because why can't we acknowledge and recognize how this country was established, that this country was basically invaded by outsiders and land was taken, people were moved around and all type of things, and to aggressively, and like you say, to criminalize immigration and illegal immigration, if for a lack of a better term, like to criminalize it is just the most hypocritical thing to me, just like what we're seeing with what's going on in the Black community with the police reform and what all of that came out of. So if we look at the inception, let's go back, and maybe there are some things that need to be changed to where it can work for everyone and be fair for everyone. But you know, it's a lot of work to be done, and we need people like you and your insight on the bench, because I know at the end of the day you have the Constitution and things like that you have to follow, but your insight, and it sounds like you're willing to take more of a restorative justice approach of asking why and how and trying to fix those issues to where maybe this person doesn't become a repeat offender, if that's what I'm hearing from you.
Absolutely. I think that the system has moved too heavily towards dehumanize, and that makes it unfair. And that's not the law, actually. You know, the law requires that decision makers account for people's stories and circumstances. So bringing that ability to have a perspective on that, I hope can produce some healings. There's limitations, but it's a really important start.
Mhm. And this is a question I ask because and this goes back to the whole police reform, and you know, you have the whole there's good cops, there's bad cops, but at the end of the day, and I think you alluded to it as well, that if you're turning a blind eye to it, and you were talking about it in the legal system, but if you're turning a blind eye to something, then aren't you just as guilty? And coming into the bench, what would be your approach there? Because from the outside looking in, a lot of people feel like the system is broken, there are things that's wrong. Um, would it be something that would just be ignored, or and not anything that you'll put publicly, but something maybe you'll fight behind the scenes, you know, if you see people being treated unfairly and unjustly and not according to the Constitution, and emotions going into decisions and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I expect all of my work is transparent. All of my work will be public information, right? Whether I want that or not, but I embrace that. Um, my goal is to do my work in a way that is consistent with the law
Mhm.
and builds people's confidence in the system. And I think that the other part of it, you know, you mentioned like I have to follow the Constitution, and that's actually, I would change that, because my experience having stood next to people is that people follow laws and they forget that the Constitution is law too. And the concept or philosophy or rule that equal justice under the law, like that's not optional, it's actually law. And our
Mhm.
leaders who have not followed that law are doing wrong. So whatever decisions we make have to be consistent with that rule, because it is law.
Mhm.
And whatever practices we have in our court that make it accessible or not, that show people, like that give people an understanding of what it is they're there for, that also has to be equal and equitable. You know, judges, the way they run their courtroom, uh, that's a rule too. And it affects a lot of people. It affects everyone that goes through there and that sees and is witness to public court proceedings. And so I think it's our job to work on that part of it too. I don't just get to decide like, oh, this is the legal question, this is how I rule. Like, how do I conduct myself? People are watching. This is the court of law. I'm elected. And the decision I make has to be consistent with the law. And so, you know, I actually think it's a goal. And if I'm not doing it, I need to get out.
Gotcha. So what in, I think we pretty much answered it, but I want to ask you anyway, what made you decide I'm going to run for judge?
Yeah, so after I was a public defender, I did civil rights work, also with the criminal justice system, because I wanted it to be a leader. I saw these issues happen to client time and time again, and I wanted to make a difference and say, okay, like there's some things broken here, and I wanted to be better. And even in that role, you know, it was me standing next to clients or writing a brief on behalf of clients saying, hey, judge, this is what's wrong. And so it occurred to me that a final stop in whether the law is followed or not is in our judges. And the issue is so important to me. It's urgent that our justice system be reformed, that it reflect our people's needs, that it reflect the law, that it follow equal justice under the law as a rule. And for that to happen, our leaders, our people in power must be on board with that. And I'm on board with that. And I don't think some people in power are on board with that. So I'm like, well, let me try this.
Yeah, but that's wonderful to, again, step up and fill that void and be that shining example. That's wonderful. So what exactly are you running on? Exactly. What things are you looking to bring to the bench exactly?
Yeah. So right now, a big issue obviously is the pandemic. And so it's really shifted how I think about some things as far as, oh, actually, there doesn't seem to be a really clear emergency plan for the courts to jump into when something like this happens. And so they kind of automatically shut down and then need to take a lot of time to do planning to accommodate. But the reality is the pandemic hit in March, but 3 years ago, you know, we were hit by Hurricane Harvey. And, you know, after Harvey, the building that was the courthouse, that is the courthouse, it flooded and it was shut down. And they had court in jail, like the jail was the courthouse. So it's just like, I was remembering that to think like, we kind of dropped the ball after Harvey. I mean, we've been sort of hustling to try to come back from that. And there's like this huge backlog. So I think a plan forward, and then a way to deal with this backlog. Like we haven't had a jury trial in our criminal cases since March. You know that there's almost 8,000 people in jail today waiting for their trial.
You said you haven't had a criminal court case since March?
A criminal jury trial.
Jury trial since March. So it's a lot of people that chose to have a trial by jury, and it's only been one since March. Wow.
The Supreme Court and the Criminal Court of Appeals said that there will be no in-person jury trials. The exception is that it's supposed to start October 1st. We'll see. They keep extending it. But they said that they're allowing virtual trials, and then they're allowing certain trials to proceed if you get special permission. And I think that one of the things that's happened is everyone's like, well, I guess we can't have jury trials. But that's not acceptable, right? I mean,
it's not.
Maybe you have to follow the rule of the Supreme Court, but you have to come up with solutions to account for the fact that people have a right to a trial, and like they've been waiting in jail for a long time.
It's the dehumanization that's in there that you're saying, because have they thought that you have a person who can either be at home or not, their family's waiting on them, and then we've heard about the spread of COVID in the system. Wouldn't you be trying to get everybody who's not supposed to be there out and get them to where they need to be? So you want to keep this moving. And like you say, we should have thinkers in these positions that can come up with alternatives. And like you say, the ball has been dropped. And unfortunately, this is something I've seen on the local level, the state level. I don't even want to talk about the federal level. But just here in Texas, just like we have Cynthia Bailey, who's her whole election, along with Tarsha Jackson, has been held up because someone has a felony and the question comes up, can a felon hold office and hold the seat? But this is the third or fourth time that this has happened in Texas, and it hasn't been brought to the forefront by the legislature to decide and make the language clear. But I think finally we may get that out of this, but that's just something I see time and time again in our system in Texas, and we do need more people to stand up and really create change and be proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you're doing this. I mean, and I think you're right, right? It's at every level. And one of the things I talk about, and I know other candidates have been talking about, is the importance of local elections. Obviously, we know the impact our president can have on some scale. But, you know, there's local people who make laws that affect all of our lives. There's judges that rule on laws that affect all of our lives. And there's, you know, sheriffs and district attorneys and constables and county commissioners that all get elected that make massive decisions about how we're spending our money and what decisions are being made and how they're being implemented. So, you know, everybody that cares about any issue that makes you want to vote for president, criminal justice, healthcare, immigration, education, all of those issues manifest with your local races. So please, please, you know, do what you can to, if you can register to vote, great. If you can't, you know, find some people that can, educate yourselves and figure out who on that ballot will represent you. And there's a lot of really great options. We have a strong, diverse, talented Democratic ticket on the local level, all the way up and down the ballot. And I'm so honored to be a part of it. I know it's generations of sacrifice for us to be able to be here. And we're so proud, and we're gonna work hard. We are going to make your vote worth it.
Yep. And just me and I, from Mangrove's point, we're just looking for the right person. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, we want a person that's going to be in for the people. And we need to be vetting everyone, because I believe it on through and through everything is good and bad and everything. So I can't wholeheartedly run with anything. I take the good out of it and I run with that. And it's important that we vote, because it's a lot of issues going on in our city, and voting locally is where we have and can see results today, tomorrow, when they get in office. They can really implement things. On a state level, you have to get more people involved. You have to start talking to people in other districts and rally that way. On the local level, it's about your community, and you can get people in your community to speak to these representatives and really get your issues addressed. And we have to grow from there. Like I say, on the state level, that's when you rally and start getting with other districts. And on the federal level, you have to have a widespread issue. And that's another thing I'm trying to get people to understand about this process who are not acclimated in it, is that it's not more so personal issues, it's personal issues that affect more than one person. And if you can find a common issue in your community and have everyone stand up on it, then you should have an elected official that should hear you and try to find some type of resolution.
That's real. I appreciate that. And I think about that because some people, they're like, criminal judge. I mean, how does that affect me, right? I'm not, and I think for me, or maybe our communities, you know, we feel it. We feel the presence of law enforcement, and we know, but it really is a public health issue. I mean, the well-being of our entire society, locally and nationally, is impacted by people, by violence, by the incarceration system, which is its own form of violence and must be taken really seriously, and by our courts, which are, you know, our governments that we want to trust to make good decisions. So it's a public health and well-being issue. So
definitely
all races matter.
They really do. They really do. All races matter. Because we're all affected. We're all affected. And, you know, it's more so race was always about economics in this country and still is. But then we're also looking at class. I don't think people are talking about the division within the classes. And that spreads across all races. And we really have people out there that think they're better than other people. So that's something that we're dealing with. And, you know, we have to take those shots and those slugs. And there's people that don't deal with our issues. And they may not ever know where we're coming from unless they deal with our issues. And unfortunately, because they're on a certain side of it, they may not have. But to stand there and witness it and watch and know, again, makes you just as guilty and accountable. And it's a lot of growth, and it's all going to start. And I like what you said, to bring trust back to the system, and to know that we have people like you and your mind and your heart and your spirit on the bench. I think it would give people faith and trust in that system and the governance, which at the end of the day, that was set forth by God himself. And who are we to walk over that and step over that and not be respectful of it and hold it to its utmost and serve, and not be self-serving in those positions. So, and I really thank you for coming on. And I want to go back to when you said you used to protest. How was that experience? And I'm pretty sure it's empowering, and I'm sure it's something that you carry with you throughout your life. I kind of want to go into a little bit more detail. What was going on? And the reason why too, I want to talk about this, because I think the Black and brown community, we need to understand that a lot of the issues that we face are the same, because we've systematically been kept at the bottom and, in my opinion, pit against one another. So I am very proactive in trying to bridge that gap and having us all to understand that we're facing a lot of the same issues, and we need to come together on those issues as well. But yeah, so tell us a little bit about that, and how was it, and what would bring about the protests and things like that.
So I just want to say that I'm with you. I believe in Black and brown unity. It's so important to me. And I also want to clarify, because I think when I talked about races earlier, I didn't mean like race, because don't think I would say something.
You meant all
like,
races now.
Like election races, like they call mine a judicial race, like running a campaign.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate that, because now we get to have this clarification for we say words, and I care a lot about words. I know people get sensitive about people being sensitive, but the reality is it's important. And in the same way that you say, like, we have Black and brown community have similar experience, like, to the extent that we don't, like, also find something in your own experience that gives you compassion and empathy for another person's experience, especially if it includes struggle.
Right.
So I'm with you on that. So I think protesting my parents, you mean my parents boycotting like grapes?
Boycotting, I'm sorry, yeah, boycotting.
No,
which is protest within itself.
Yeah, no, I've protested,
Yeah.
of course. But yeah, so that was when I was little, and there was a national movement, United Farm Workers movement, that raised awareness to the conditions of farm workers. And there was a national strike.
Mm-hmm.
I learned more about it afterwards, and during, all I knew during was, like, I wasn't allowed to eat grapes,
right?
Because we were standing in solidarity with the strike.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that activity is so important. It's so important. I mean, we all went to George Floyd protests, right?
It's effective. It draws attention to an issue, for sure.
And that sometimes the folks in charge don't know what matters to people. And so people showing up is a way to show that. I mean, Standing Rock, I think, is an amazing example too, because it was so long. And those are people that, when people are relentless and consistent, then you really make a point. It was so long, and there's still a battle about it. There's like a legal battle about it. And but I'm a big fan of standing up to raise awareness to what matters for you, and to make asks and demands of the government that represents you. And so hopefully it can happen also without protest, but it won't always, and that's okay.
Hopefully, like you say, people can see other people's issues and struggles and take compassion with it. With that, what type of work do you do in the community outside of your paid work and things like that? Do you have any type of programs? Do you plan on whenever you take office, do you plan on creating any programs, like job training programs or programs to get people back acclimated to the world, especially dealing with, what you deal with every day in the courts?
Yeah. It's funny because I used to make it a point to not work outside of work
Mhm.
because work was so heavy. And so I spent a lot of time with Aztec Dance, and it is a community. It
Okay.
involves youth. It involves elders and, teaching. And it's sort of a practice. And so it's almost like a church community.
No,
So
it
that's,
makes sense.
uh
It's
it's a
more
big part.
cultural.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so no, it makes sense.
But I think one thing I do want to do as a judge is make sure that the community knows what's going on in the courts. I think it's a disadvantage. Right now, I feel like I'm campaigning and people kind of have a sense of what they don't like about the justice system, but there's so much that happens in there, and folks aren't even told. So one of my extracurriculars I do hope to spend some energy towards is outreach,
Okay.
digital, in person. Hopefully one day we'll be able to see people in person again. But maybe just stuff like this, maybe have a podcast and be like updates from the 351st. So folks know that it's a public service.
No, that's awesome. That's amazing. I love it. So where do you have any upcoming events, anything like that where we can find you, where people can come out and meet you, or any virtual events where they may have a chance to speak to you?
Yeah, so right now we're planning a door hanger event. So if you're interested, send me an email.
Mhm.
I hope that I can, it's nata@nataliacornelio.com. Um, I'm like, how I don't know how people, but if you go to my website, nataliacornelio.com, you can send me a message there and you can get involved and do some leaving door hangers and literature on folks' doors to get the word out about our campaign. I'm going to have a fundraiser. We're going to play Loteria virtually, raise some funds for the campaign. If you know what that is, it's like a Mexican bingo game that's going to be
Oh
on
yeah.
September 30th. You can also go to my website and get more details about that. And then next Thursday, I'm actually hosting a panel at noon. It's going to involve one of our current district judges, the sheriff, and Brian Middleton, the Fort Bend district attorney. And we're going to talk about the impact of COVID on the jail population and the courts, and what's been done and what else can be done. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. That's hosted by the Harris County Democratic Lawyers Association on Thursday, the 24th at noon. And it's going to be through Facebook. Like, I believe you can, if you go to the Facebook page, you can just register. But I'll try to put a link on my website too, so you can just find everything in the same place.
All right, cool. And before we get out of here, what are your thoughts? It's a lot of verbiage and words like defunding the police going around. How do you feel about that? And if so, what is your definition of that, if you have one, of defunding the police?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. I'm running for a judicial position, and it's really important that for everyone to know that I take really seriously the separation of powers, and the role of judges is to make decisions in applying the law. And I don't want people's confidence in me, in knowing that that's my work to change. I think that what I hear when people say stuff like defund the police, it's a range of things, right? Like, people are angry, understandable. People want change. There should be some movement towards change. And I think that we need to pay for things that further well-being.
Gotcha.
We have for too long paid for justice and a carceral system, and we need to start paying for health programs, education programs, housing programs, the things that keep people out of trouble and allow people to flourish. That's what I hear. That's how I've studied the defund the police and similar movements. It's a slag, it's like a tag word.
Right.
So it kind of comes out as against, but it can also be an opportunity to build. I know it's hard sometimes to hear language, depending on who you are, to mean what the opportunity of that language is. But I think for that, we can hopefully work towards building some infrastructure that's not just the justice system. Like, I want to be a judge, but if there was no arrests, you know, I would be like, cool, like
Right.
I'm out of a job, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to try to lobby for arrests to happen just so that I have this job. Like,
Right.
I've done my job. The world is working the way it's supposed to. Like, what other cool thing can I do? I need to be willing to let go of me doing what's been always done before if it's not working anymore, if it's
Hey,
not what we
the day that you can travel around and spread the Aztec culture and dance, then everything's right in the world, right?
get me.
Yep. So I definitely get it, and that's where, and I think we need to continue to have this conversation around that term, because I think a lot of people hear it and automatically feel like we're saying, or people are saying, abolish the police. No, we're not saying that, but the city of Houston just increased the HPD budget this year. And we saw what happened last week or the week before when the body cam footage came out for Nicholas Chavez, and how tragic that was. And in my opinion, it was outright murder. And we have these issues, and it does stem from a lack of training and understanding, and maybe too much being put on a police officer's plate to have to deal with people that are going through mental breakdowns and things like that. Maybe that shouldn't be their job. Maybe it should be handled by someone who's more equipped. And then if the person gets out of hand or too violent, then maybe they can come in or be there for assistance, but they shouldn't be the main person handling those calls. And it's just a reallocation of funds, like you say, to bring in resources that can provide healing within our communities and not continue to tear them apart. So, and we thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad we got to sit down and speak a little. And I love what you stand for. Definitely want to wish you the best at the polls in November.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. You're welcome. So for everybody out there watching, this is Natalia Cornelio, sorry. And
The more you say it, the more they'll remember it, and then they'll vote for me. So
there you go. There you go. So Natalia. So, and she's running for judge, and this is what this all is all about. So we can sit down and we can really speak with them open and candidly, and really get a feel for who they are. And if you feel like this is the person for you, then you see the name there at the bottom of the screen, and make sure you vote for that person. And that's what this is all about, identifying people who identify with us and represent our community and what we want to see in our community. Um, I know it sounded like I was wrapping up, but one question I have to ask you about, I'm sorry, cite and release. How do you feel about that? That just came out with HPD. Have you had a chance to read up on that?
A little bit. I know that, you know, the sheriff of Harris County started that program a while ago. He had been pushing for it for a while. So I'm glad that the police department is involved. Again, I think the justice system, all hands on deck as far as getting ahead of the problem as early as possible. We know that, you know, we want to avoid nonviolent offenses being in jail. The jail population is huge. People have COVID, people are dying. It's not a good place. So we want to limit its use. So cite and release, legally authorized, no reason that we shouldn't do it, and an opportunity to learn kind of what you were talking about, Carl, like how to build, to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be good for
And
us.
one thing I do, and I'm happy that we're taking steps, and I'm talking about the city. I'm happy we're taking steps in the right direction, but those fines are kind of excessive. You don't have $3,000 sitting around, but that's just something that we'll have to continue to talk about as a community and as a people to really make this thing make sense for everybody. But again, I'm happy we're taking steps in the right direction.
And
So,
no, just to add to what you're saying, because I actually did, I'm a civil rights lawyer, so I've done a lot of work challenging the criminalization of poverty and putting folks in jail based on being unable to pay money. So, you know, I don't know much, I don't know about cite and release or what part you're referring to, but I don't think it's supposed to be about fines. It's just supposed to be about giving somebody a ticket instead of bringing them to jail for them to just get out because their charge is not serious enough to hold them there. And then there are fines that are allowed under the law, but a judge has to consider ability to pay before imposing it. And certainly inability to pay if you haven't paid something that you owe, because you can't go to jail just because you don't have money. So I want to be really clear on that, and that the law is that, and we've sort of shifting our consciousness for folks to realize that, but we're getting there, and it's very important. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, well, want to thank everybody for joining in tonight. Before we get out of here, anybody that's new to the show, go ahead and hit the like button. We have a lot more coming up like this. Good information that comes out of this show, so we'll love to have you. Thank you so much for tuning in if this is your first time. If you're a repeat, thank you. We love it. We're glad to be able to bring this information to you. Go ahead and check out the Mangrove Community website, www.mangrovecommunity.org. We're trying to keep this thing moving here, and we know in life everything takes a little finances. We have I Vote shirts. You can support the movement. They're pretty neat shirts, to let people know that, hey, we vote. We need to vote together. And what we're doing here at Mangrove is we're showing people that your vote does count, and to be an informed voter, your vote holds a lot of power, it holds a lot of weight, especially if your community is on the same page and you all are together with this and looking at the candidates together and seeing who would best represent your community. That's how this thing has always been done, with the people who really, really participate in voting. And that's how it continues to needs to be done. But we need to get people involved who haven't always been involved, underrepresented groups, and the groups that have flat out been suppressed. And we have a long fight ahead of us. I saw today in the news there were some states that had early voting, and they stood in line for hours because of the social distancing and things like that. So we have to prepare ourselves. We can't get deterred. We can't get frustrated and leave. I don't know who, but I think somebody wants us to do that, and we can't let them win. So please endure, and prepare yourself for when you go to the polls. Thank you all so much for joining in. Thank you again for having us. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Again, that one thing that's burning inside of you that you want to do, that you think about doing, you've been thinking about doing for years, or the idea may just came yesterday, that's your passion and your purpose. Make a move on your purpose today. It can change your life. Y'all have a good one. Thank you again.